he will put Canadians back in charge of their lives. He's going to remove the gatekeepers so we could build more, grow more, produce more right here in Canada. And friends, he's going to make sure he restores our respect for our farmers, because farmers feed our families. And most importantly, Pierre believes in a country where the state is servant, not master. Where smaller government invites bigger citizens. So please join me in giving a strong Oxford welcome to the next Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre.
Thank you, Woodstock. Great to be with you. Thank you very much to the great common sense conservative Arpan Canna, who's the next member of Parliament for Oxford. Give him a round of applause. He's not the only common sense conservative. We've got Ernie Hardeman here. We've got Leanne Rood, farmer, member of Parliament, businesswoman. We've got the great prosecutor of liberal corruption and censorship. Larry Brock is here as well. Thank you very much. And we got a whole room full of common sense conservatives. We're going to make common sense common again, aren't we? And boy, do we ever need it. Yeah. You see, the other day, Justin Trudeau, he was actually in Canada, believe it or not. He was visiting town from abroad, and he said that I need to wake up and get woke. Did you hear that? Well, I think his problem is that a lot of people are waking up to how woke and broke this country has become after 8 years of his leadership, right? You know, I take it personally, because my story's a lot like Arpan's. Arpan comes from a modest, middle-class upbringing. He had to work for everything he has. Started a business, built a family. He's a law-abiding firearms owner, follows the law, not a criminal like Trudeau would have our hunters and professional sport shooters labeled. He's a decent person who's earned his place in this country and wants to serve his fellow citizens. My story is a lot like his. I was born to a teenage mom who was too young to raise me, put me up for adoption to two school teachers, and they always taught me that it didn't matter in Canada where you came from or who you knew. It mattered where you were going and what you could do. And that's the country my wife came to as a refugee. It's the country we want for our kids and yours, but it is not the country that we see when we look around today. Everything costs more. Work no longer pays. Housing costs have doubled. Drugs, disorder, crime, and chaos rule our streets, and our people are more divided and controlled than ever before. This is 8 years of Justin Trudeau. Ladies and gentlemen, it is natural under these terrible circumstances, and with the way our country is going, to feel hopeless. But I'm here today to say to you that if we build on the solid foundations of freedom that built this country, we can restore Canada's promise, and that is exactly what we will do. We're going to make this country work for the people who do the work. We're going to rely on the common sense of the common people united for our common home, and it starts by bringing home lower prices for our people. Let's start Let's discuss how we got into this mess in the first place, though, because it was entirely predictable. The government printed $400 billion of brand new cash, increased the money supply by 20%, and what had that's right, to help us, right? Well, help is always the sunny side of control, isn't it? And so what happens when emperors, dictators, prime ministers, and presidents create more cash to pay for their out-of-control spending? The same thing that happened when his father was in power. More dollars bidding up fewer goods equals higher prices. You get 10 loaves of bread and $10, it's $1 for each loaf. You double the number of dollars to 20 and you still have 10 loaves of bread. What do you know? All of a sudden it's $2 for each loaf. All that spending is bidding up the cost of the goods we buy and the interest we pay. The cost of government is driving up the cost of living. It is the same mistake that has been made thousands of years with exactly the same result. Just as the dog returns to its vomit and the sow returns to her mire, the burned fool's bandaged finger goes wobbling back to the fire, right? Same mistakes over and over and over again. And so, no wonder we're paying more for everything. It's great if you're rich. The super rich, the bankers, and the elites are better off because their assets inflate in value. But the working people see the purchasing power of their paychecks robbed from them, and it's a transfer of wealth from the have-nots to the have-yots. And so it is after 8 years of Trudeau. How are we going to turn it around? First of all, we're going to cap government spending. We're going to bring in a common-sense dollar-for-dollar law that requires every new dollar of spending be met with a dollar of savings to pay for it. That means we're going to bring the same common-sense trade-offs that single mom has to make to manage her family budget. If she wants to spend more here, she spends less there. If she wants to get a new patio, she might skip the vacation, or better yet, she might get a deal on the vacation and then go get some used lumber in order to save on the patio and do both, but within the prescribed budget. Politicians, bureaucrats don't have to make those trade-offs because they're the only creatures in the universe that don't have to live with scarcity. They just push scarcity off onto everyone else with higher inflation, debt, and taxes. No more. The dollar-for-dollar law will force those trade-offs on the government. It will cap the cost of the state while the taxpayer and the economy catches up, because you've been pinching your pennies long enough. It's time for the government to start pinching its pennies too. We're going to cut the waste. $21 billion spent on high-priced consultants. That's over $1,000 for every family in Canada, 100% increase. Some of these guys charge $2,000 a day for their so-called work. What are they actually doing? The bureaucracy is 1/3 bigger. It costs 50% more. Bring the work inside the government, make the public servants do the job, and stop paying these high-priced consultants. That's one way to bring down the cost for the taxpayer. That will bring down the cost. We will balance the budget, but we will also axe the wasteful and ineffective carbon tax. Axe the 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 tax. You believe it. Trudeau and the NDP want to raise this tax up to over 41 cents a litre, costing thousands of dollars in higher home heating and groceries. Everything that's shipped by truck will become more expensive. Meanwhile, he jets around the world, burning high-carbon jet fuel. He is a high-carbon hypocrite. So why doesn't he park the jet, stop the hypocrisy, and axe the tax? That would make some sense. You know, and that will lower the cost for our farmers so they can produce more of the food right here at home. We're going to bring home the food production to this country. The southern part of my riding has a little place called Manotick. Anybody been to Manotick before? Beautiful little place. They have the little miracles of Manotick, tiny little tomatoes you can buy there. But unfortunately, Trudeau's charging a carbon tax on the CO2 that they release into the greenhouse, even though it's absorbed by the plant life. He missed that day in science class, right? And so it costs more money for a Manotick tomato in Manotick than for a Mexican tomato in Manotick. So Trudeau sends the price signal to the customer to buy the Mexican tomato, which had to be trucked and trained all the way from Mexico, burning diesel across North America. Why don't we stop importing food? We can grow our own. Let's axe the tax, lower the cost, and let our farmers feed us. Our farmers work hard, but unfortunately, hard work no longer pays off. Hard work no longer pays off in Trudeau's Canada. And we're going to solve that by bringing home powerful paychecks with lower taxes that reward hard work. Let me talk about the problem here. Right now, if you're a single mom with 3 kids earning 60 grand, you go out and earn an extra buck, you lose 80 cents on the dollar in clawbacks of your child care benefit and taxes on your paycheck, not to mention the carbon and gas tax just to get to work. So that's out of a $25 an hour wage, she keeps $5 of that extra hour of work. No one should be expected to work for $5 an hour. It's not even minimum wage. We've got to reform the tax and programs and cut taxes so that people bring home more of each dollar they earn, and hard work once again pays off in this country of ours. But we also have to bring the paychecks back to this country. Instead of sending our jobs abroad, as Trudeau's been doing. He's got an anti-resource development program that forces us to import 130,000 barrels of overseas oil every single day, even though we have the 3rd biggest supply of oil right here in our country. Tankers come across the ocean from Saudi Arabia to St. John, New Brunswick, where the Irvings refine it and sell it here, and we send our money abroad. Why are we giving our money away to foreign dirty dictatorships? Why don't we repeal Trudeau's anti-energy laws and build Canadian pipelines with Canadian steel to bring Canadian energy to Canadian markets? Bring it home. Bring it home to Canada. Bring it home. It's not just oil, it's natural gas. We've got 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas right underneath our feet. The world needs it. Asia needs it to get off dirty coal. Europe needs it to get off dependence on Putin. Yet when Trudeau took office, there were 15 proposed LNG liquefaction plants. 0 have been completed. He says there's no business case. The Japanese Prime Minister and the German Chancellor came to Canada and said, we need your natural gas. He said, call the Kremlin. Putin will give you the gas you need. We'd rather stay poor, he says. He says there's no business case. Well, nobody told Qatar they've more than doubled their gas production. Nobody told the Americans they built 7 plants. Nobody told the Germans they built an import terminal in 194 days from concept to completion. And yet in 8 years, we've not completed a single one here in Canada. A Pierre Poilievre-led government will get the gatekeepers out of the way, approve natural gas liquefaction programs. We will get these projects built exclusively with private money so we can liquefy that gas, send it to Asia to close down Asian coal-fired plants, send it to Europe to break Europe's dependence on Putin, and turn dollars for dictators into paychecks for our people. We have all the advantages here. You know what it takes to liquefy gas? Anybody know? Cold weather. You know, what do we have in Canada? Cold weather. It got so cold last winter in Ottawa, Trudeau was seen with his hands in his own pockets. We've got to take advantage of our cold weather, right? Do something with it. And now he says he wants everybody driving electric cars, right? Now, where is he going to get the lithium to go in those batteries? Of course, from China, right? His favorite country in the whole world. Remember, he said he admires the basic Chinese communist dictatorship. So here's his great environmental plan. He wants to burn more coal in China to refine lithium and put it in batteries over here. Rather than using the stuff we have the sixth biggest supply of lithium on planet Earth, and yet we produced not a single tablespoon of the stuff in 2021. Why? Because it takes 25 years actually, to get a mine approved. And the one mine that is starting to become operational in Canada, well, he sold that mine to who? To China. You're starting to see a trend here, aren't you? So listen, instead of importing from dirty foreign dictatorships, we're going to speed up mining. We're going to speed up production. We're going to make the stuff in this country. We're going to turn these dollars for dictatorships into paychecks for our people. We're going to bring it home and bring it home for our country for a change, aren't we? Put our own people ahead of the foreign governments. We're going to bring home paychecks for our brilliant immigrants. We have 20,000 immigrant doctors and 32,000 immigrant nurses banned from working in our hospitals, even though they're fully qualified, because there's no national testing system that will allow them to prove their qualifications. A Pierre Poilievre-led government will bring in a blue seal standard for the professions, the same as we have a red seal for the trades, so that anyone who wants to prove their qualifications to work in our professions can take a test, prove they're able, get to work, serve our patients, and earn powerful paychecks at the same time. And by the way, while we're at it, one way to get more nurses and doctors would be to get rid of all of these vaccine mandates across the country. Crazy. Nuts. Yeah. It's common sense. Common sense. We're going to bring homes that people can afford. There's no common sense in living in the second biggest country on earth, and yet 9 out of 10 of our young people say they cannot afford to put a roof over their head ever. This is insane. You know that it now costs 70% of the average family's paycheck to make payments on the average new home every month. 70%. It's mathematically impossible. And yet, here we are. We have Vancouver, which is the third most overpriced housing market in the world. Toronto is number 10. And of course, those prices are radiating out to communities just like this one. How is it possible that Toronto and Vancouver are more expensive than Manhattan, Singapore, London, England, and countless other places that have more people, more money, and less land? How is it possible that a tiny little shack in Niagara goes for $550,000, and yet about 20-minute drive south in the United States of America, a much more impressive house goes for $150,000? It's crazy. 8 years of Justin Trudeau and housing costs have doubled. Now, we know the reasons. His spending has driven up interest rates on mortgage payments, but also the government gatekeepers block construction. We rank second last in the OECD for the time that it takes to get a building permit. Trudeau's answer is to give big fat checks to the municipal bureaucrats who blocked the building in the first place. Billions of dollars so they can build up their bureaucracies and stand in the way. The cost of red tape and bureaucracy is $650,000 for every single home in Vancouver, about $350,000 for every house in Toronto, and that's why we have the fewest houses per capita in the G7, even though we have the most land to build on. So what's the solution? My common sense plan is to link the number of dollars the federal government gives to each city to the number of houses they allow to be built. The faster they build and the lower the cost of the permits, the more money I will give them. If they block construction, I will cut back their infrastructure money and fine them for standing in the way. We will require every federally funded transit station be surrounded by and even built on top of with apartment complexes so that our young people can live right next to the bus or train, and we will sell off 6,000 federal buildings. These big, ugly buildings, we don't need them. They're largely empty. Sell them off. Turn them into housing. It's common sense, you know? And you know something? It warms my heart to think of the beautiful family pulling up in their U-Haul to their wonderful new home in the former headquarters of the CBC. Yeah, she wants to sell off 24 Sussex Drive. What do you think? Good idea? That's not a bad, you know, that's an interesting suggestion. Larry, can you get me a report on my desk by noon on Monday on that one? Okay, all right. See, this is where the best ideas come from. Well, we need some good ideas to bring safety back to our streets. We've got crime and chaos, drugs and disorder. Violent crime is up 32% right across our country. Did you guys hear about the robbery that happened in Ottawa the other day? Robber walked up to a guy, pulled a gun, said, "Give me all your money." Guy said, "Wait a sec, do you know who I am? I'm Justin Trudeau." The robber said, "In that case, give me all my money." Oh, boy. So Trudeau's policy is the following. He believes in bail and early parole for repeat violent offenders. They're arrested and released the very same day, right? They laugh at the police. They literally laugh at the police. And so the cops in this state, they literally arrest the same people 3 or 4 times in a day. In Vancouver, this is a fact, they arrested the same 40 people 6,000 times in a year. That's 150 arrests per criminal per year. If you take those 40 criminals off the street, you'd have 6,000 fewer people hit over the head with a baseball bat or stabbed at a transit station. And yet Trudeau releases them. And his priority, his solution, I asked him, what are you going to do with all the stabbings that are happening in our big city? He said he's going to ban hunting rifles. That's his solution. As though the Inuit hunter is responsible for the downtown shooting in Toronto. Give me a break. This guy has absolutely no common sense. He's completely disconnected from the reality. So here's my common sense plan on crime. 1, for repeat violent offenders, we will bring in jail, not bail. Jail, not bail. 2, we are going to respect our hunters and our law-abiding firearms owners. We're going to give them the rights to keep their firearms. And instead, we're going to use the money Trudeau is going to waste on the gun buyback to reinforce our borders and keep the illegal guns out that are responsible for 82% of the violent crime. And then there's the drugs. You know, Trudeau told me when he found out I was coming here, he said, everybody in Woodstock loves drugs. I said, Trudeau, that's the wrong Woodstock, man. And this is not the 1960s. If you remember Woodstock, you weren't there, right? That's the old saying. But joking aside, 30,000 people have lost their lives to drug overdoses since Trudeau took office. Now, this is his bright idea, to give people more drugs paid for by taxpayers. Now, he says it's safe. It's very safe. So safe that 30,000 people have died from it, right? Now, here's the theory, that if the government provides it, they'll make sure there's no contaminants in it, and people can walk up to a vending machine, like the kind you get a chocolate bar from. You can walk up in Vancouver, tap a few buttons, and out drops your hydromorphine. All right? What happens, though, is that the hydromorphine only gets you high for a few weeks, and then you need something stronger. So what do? They sell the hydromorphine to kids in order to use the profits to buy more powerful fentanyl. 100 times more potent than heroin. And the fentanyl kills them. Then the kids get bored of the hydromorphine. So what do? Sell the hydromorphine to other kids and then use the profits to buy fentanyl, and all of a sudden a mother gets a tragic phone call that her kid was over at a house party and dropped dead after using that drug. Since they started this experiment, there has been a 300% increase in drug overdoses in the city of Vancouver. Now, Trudeau has signed a deal with the NDP government in that province that he wants to take nationwide, which legalizes heroin, crack, and other hard drugs. He wants to, it is actually faster to get a permit to sell cocaine than it is to get a passport in Justin Trudeau's Canada. You can see it. Go to my Twitter account. You will see a picture of local shops setting up and selling retail these hard drugs. This is nuts, my friends. So here's my plan. My common sense plan bans hard drugs, stops giving out taxpayer-funded drugs, and puts the money into rehabilitation and recovery so that we can bring home our loved ones drug-free. Absolutely. And you know who we're going to make pay for it? The pharmaceutical companies, the corrupt pharmaceutical companies. They pushed these drugs on our medical system. They told nurses, doctors, pharmacists, and others that they were totally safe and addiction-free. They knew they were lying. The documents now show they were actually paying out bonuses to distributors who caused overdoses because that would juice up their profits while destroying working-class families. They had nurses going to working-class people who had lost their job and were down on their luck and said, "You got a sore back? I've got something for you." And that started the opioid crisis we have today. The Americans have sued these pharmaceutical companies and brought home $54 billion in settlements. I will launch a massive lawsuit against these pharmaceutical companies. We will recover billions of dollars, and we will put that into recovery and treatment. We'll make them pay. And we're going to bring home freedom to our country, aren't we? Yes. See, one liberal recently asked me, what is the definition of woke? They asked me this. I kept talking about their woke agenda. Well, Trudeau should be able to define it, but I'll define it for him. Wokeism is about defining people based on group identity rather than individual character. Why do we have wokeism? Well, because if the government can keep everybody divided into groups and fighting with each other, well, then they all turn to the state in order to protect them from their neighbor, right? If you're afraid of your neighbor, you might not notice that you can't pay your rent. By the way, groups are easier to control than are individuals. It's much easier to herd sheep than it is to herd cats, right? Cats are individualistic. Sheep can be herded, and that's why Trudeau likes to divide people by race, gender, ethnicity, vaccine status, and every other irrelevant characteristic, rather than honoring the humanity of each individual based on their own merits, right? That's what this is about. And so, in the meantime, he uses this all as an excuse to take control. He's passed C-11, which would control what you see and say on the internet. He wants further censorship online. These bills, according to the experts on the subject, say they exist nowhere on earth outside of communist China, North Korea, and Cuba. Now, we know Justin Trudeau says he admires the basic Chinese communist dictatorship. We know he said he believed that Fidel Castro was a great leader. That's his ideology. That's how he sees the world. He believes in their policies rather than the common sense ideas that we had here in this country for so long. It's no wonder why Beijing interfered in 2 elections to help Justin Trudeau win elections, is it? It's no wonder at all. So here's my common sense plan. We're going to restore our freedoms by bringing back Section 2B of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. To be or not to be? That is the question. My answer is yes to freedom of expression. We will repeal C-11. We will require every university that wants to get federal funding for research honor free expression for both its students and faculties. If they don't like Jordan Peterson, they can debate him. Good luck with that. But they can't shut him down. We're going to kick out foreign agents that work in this country to intimidate our people and mess with our democracy. Kick them out. We'll bring in a foreign agent registry to make sure anyone who is paid by a foreign dictatorship to manipulate politics is identified so we know who they are and what they are up to. We are going to take a stand for this country. We're going to make sure foreign dictatorships cannot take over our farmland, our resources, our water, our fishing rights, and other things that belong to us. This is our water. These are our rocks. This is our land. This is our home. And as long as I am Prime Minister, there will be no digital ID forced on our people. No central bank digital currency. And every single one of my ministers, MPs, and top officials will be banned from any involvement in the World Economic Forum. Today is a big day. Well, we'll talk about that another time. I'm keeping you here too long, but I think you should be able to drive a lot further than 15 minutes. Let's put it that way. You know, they have the big coronation going on in London. And, of course, Justin Trudeau's there. There's no question about it. Anywhere but here. But you know something? This, for me, is an occasion not just for the pageantry and all the fancy people and the royals. For me, this is an occasion to remember our ancient liberties that go back 800 years to the Magna Carta, the Great Charter. And during the Great Charter, they forced King John out into the field to sign that document that brought in place liberty under the law, that no one, including the king, was above the law. There would be no taxation without representation, no arrest without charge, no trial without jury, no confiscation without compensation. Many of the basic freedoms we have today have their origins 800 years ago, and that British tradition then spilled over here to Canada in the parliamentary system that we have to this day. And over that time, there's been an evolution which took power from behind the castle walls and brought it out into the fields with the commoners. That's why the House of Commons is green, because the first commoners met in the fields. They were the ones that did the work and brought in the harvest, right? It's the common people for whom we work. You know, if you want to see goodness, greatness, or even genius, don't look up to those on top. Look all around you. Look all around you. All around you. They're often called ordinary people. But let me tell you, they are not ordinary. The single mother that works on her feet all day as a waitress, serving 15 customers at one time, balancing 6 plates on a tray, comes home at the end of the day to help her kid with math, and balances her budget on a $15 an hour salary. She is not ordinary. She is extraordinary, my friends. The farmer who masters the sciences of sky and storm to bring food from his field to your fork, he is not ordinary, he is extraordinary. The electrician who captures lightning from the sky, runs it through a copper wire to illuminate this room, tames the most fierce force in nature to light up our world, is not ordinary, he is extraordinary. These are the great people. These are the common people. They have the right to be masters and not servants in their own country. Minister means servant. Prime Minister means first servant. That's how the real org chart works in our system. It's the people on top, the parliamentarians underneath them, and the Prime Minister serving them all. When I am your leader, I will be honored to be your servant and not your master. That is my purpose. And my guide will be the common sense of the common people, united for our common home, my home, our home. Let's bring it home. Thank you.
Wow.